So I want to tell you about a study that I genuinely couldn't stop thinking about for like 3 weeks after I first found it. It came out of the University of Oslo back in 2019, a biomechanics study. And partway through the trial, the researchers actually paused. Not because something went wrong, not because someone got hurt. They stopped because the numbers they were looking at were so far outside what they expected that they had to go back and recalibrate their sensors. Think about that for a second. The results were too unusual to trust without double-checking the equipment. The subject wasn't a pro athlete, wasn't an Olympian. He was a historical reenactor, a guy who studies Viking history. And he was pulling a replica wooden oar through a water tank in a lab in Norway. And what the sensors showed when they finally trusted them was this. His secondary muscle fiber recruitment was 31% higher than the baseline they'd recorded from competitive rowers using modern hydraulic rowing machines. 31%. The researchers, and I'm barely paraphrasing here, said they had underestimated the neuromuscular demand of variable fluid resistance. That's the scientific version of saying the old tool was doing something the new one simply doesn't. And that right there is what this whole video is about. Let me break that down in normal human terms, because the jargon can make your eyes glaze over fast. What was actually happening is this: the guy with the hand-carved wooden oar was waking up muscles that the machine-trained rowers weren't even touching. And it wasn't because he was more athletic. It wasn't because he trained harder. It was because the water kept changing on him. Every single pull was slightly different. The resistance shifted. It surged. It dropped. It surged again. And his nervous system had to respond every single time. Had to stay engaged, had to keep problem solving in real time. The hydraulic piston, it gave the exact same pushback on rep 1 as it did on rep 500. Perfectly predictable, beautifully consistent. And this is the part I kept coming back to, quietly limiting. So that raised a question for me that I honestly couldn't shake. If variable resistance builds more muscle recruitment, why did we spend the last 50 years building machines that were specifically designed to remove it? And in a country like the United States, where the fitness industry just crossed $45 billion in annual revenue, and nearly 77 million Americans hold gym memberships as of 2024, according to a 2025 industry report from MMCG Invest, that's not a small question. That's a question about what an enormous chunk of the country is actually doing when they think they're optimizing their bodies. You've probably used a rowing machine. A lot of Americans have. The IHRSA, the International Health, Racket and Sports Club Association, which is basically the trade organization for the US fitness industry, has tracked rowing machines as one of the fastest growing cardio equipment categories in American gyms over the past 5 years. And look, I get it. That smooth, controlled pull feels great. The resistance builds as you pull, releases as you return. It never surprises you, never makes you lurch mid-stroke because the load suddenly spiked. It feels like a solid workout. And honestly, it probably is a workout. I'm not here to tell you it's useless. But here's what's happening in your body while that machine is running you through its very polite, very predictable motion. Your stabilizer muscles are basically getting a free pass. Your central nervous system dips into cruise control. The resistance curve is so consistent that after a few sessions, your body stops preparing for anything different. It figures out the pattern. It optimizes for the machine. And it stops optimizing for the world outside the gym. This isn't just a vibe or a theory. Research out of the Danish Institute of Sports Science in 2021 found that athletes who trained exclusively on fixed-resistance rowing machines showed significantly less lateral trunk activation compared to athletes who trained out on open water. The machine had essentially trained their bodies to quiet down the muscles that keep you stable and upright when the ground shifts, when the load changes unexpectedly, when life doesn't behave like a gym setting. Think about what that means in real life. You've spent months building what looks like a strong back and a powerful pull. But there are entire muscle groups that were never part of the conversation. The gym made you good at the gym. And that's it. I think about this a lot in the context of where American fitness culture is heading right now. A 2025 report from the Health and Fitness Association showed that US gym visitation hit 19 consecutive quarters of growth through 2025. People are showing up more than ever. But showing up more doesn't automatically mean we're training smarter. More volume with the wrong tool is still the wrong tool. Okay, let's get into the actual mechanics of this, because it's fascinating when you break it down, and it's not romantic, it's genuinely technical. A Viking longship oar ran somewhere between 14 and 18 feet long. It was carved from a single piece of straight-grained ash, sometimes oak, but ash was preferred because of one specific property. It flexed, and that flex was not a design flaw. That was the whole point. When a rower pulled through a stroke, the blade entered water that was already disturbed, already moving, from the oar ahead of it. The resistance wasn't just from the weight of the water, it came from its momentum, its churn, the angle of the hull, how fast the ship was already moving. Every stroke was a negotiation between the rower and a system that didn't stay still. And here's the part that gets me. The oar actually bent slightly under load. That bend sent physical feedback up the shaft and into the rower's hands, wrists, and forearms. The body read that signal and adjusted instantaneously without conscious thought. These crews weren't trained the way we train athletes today. There were no periodization plans, no progressive overload spreadsheets, no 12-week programs. They rowed for hours at a stretch across open ocean in conditions that ranged from dead calm to absolute chaos. And the body adapted because it had literally no alternative. Here's the genuinely strange part about all of this. That exact process, that forced adaptation to unpredictable resistance, is what modern sports science now formally calls reactive neuromuscular training. We have a name for it. We've published peer-reviewed papers on it. The American College of Sports Medicine has written about the importance of proprioceptive and neuromuscular variability in functional training. We've been rediscovering this concept for the last 2 decades. The Vikings just called it getting to the next shore. I'll be straight with you. When I first came across that Oslo study, my gut said it was probably overstated. 31% more secondary muscle activation sounds like a number that got inflated somewhere between the lab and whoever wrote the headline about it. So I actually went and pulled the methodology. Here's what they did. They used surface electromyography across 14 different muscle groups during matched effort rowing. Same caloric output, same duration, same controls for fatigue. The variable resistance group, using a water tank oar simulation, showed meaningfully higher activation in the obliques, the serratus anterior, the deep spinal erectors, and the hip stabilizers. The hydraulic group barely registered on those sensors. Same effort level, completely different muscular conversation. And this isn't a one-off finding sitting in isolation. A 2017 review published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research looked at 23 separate trials comparing fixed and variable resistance training across multiple sports. The conclusion, careful, academic language and all, was consistent. Variable resistance produced greater gains in what the researchers called functional power, the kind of strength that actually transfers outside the training environment. The machines produced strength, yes, but, and here's their exact phrasing, it was context dependent. Good for the machine. Less reliable when the context changed. That is the most politely devastating thing I've seen a research team write about a piece of equipment. A more recent meta-analysis from PMC, published in July 2022, confirmed similar findings across 14 studies. Variable resistance training produced significantly higher maximum strength gains compared to constant resistance training, with an effect size of 0.80, a number that researchers consider meaningfully large. Here's the part that genuinely bothered me the most. We didn't abandon variable resistance because science told us it was inferior. We abandoned it because the machines are easier to sell. A hydraulic rower is clean. It fits in a commercial gym. You set the resistance with a dial. You track your output on a screen. It looks like progress. It photographs well. It's easy to explain to a new member. A water tank with a wooden oar looks like something out of a history museum. But if you actually compare the outputs, and researchers have now done that work, the so-called primitive tool wins on functional muscle recruitment, wins on stabilizer activation, and wins on what researchers call neuromuscular variability, which is your nervous system's measurable capacity to handle unexpected demands. The expensive machine optimized the experience. The old tool optimized the body. And in an American fitness market that Statista now values at roughly $47 billion, and that's projected to push towards $60 billion by 2030, according to MCG Invest. The industry has enormous commercial incentive to keep selling the machine. Now look, I want to be balanced here because I'd be cherry-picking if I didn't say this. Modern hydraulic rowers have real legitimate advantages. They're accessible. They're genuinely safer for people managing injuries or working in rehabilitation settings. They're measurable in ways that open water rowing simply isn't. And when you're tracking load and recovery for an athlete over a full season, that measurability matters. For people just starting out in fitness, for clinical rehab, for controlled training environments, the machine does things the oar can't. I'm not saying throw out the rower. What I'm saying is we made the mistake of treating the machine as the destination, the endpoint of progress. And what the research is quietly saying, in study after study, review after review, is that the machine might actually be a very useful on-ramp, not the summit. The athletes who stop there are leaving real, measurable gains on the table. What we actually lost isn't just a training method, it's a specific kind of relationship with resistance. The kind that doesn't cooperate. The kind that doesn't give you the same answer twice. We built the entire American fitness infrastructure around the assumption that consistency is the highest goal. That a controlled, repeatable stimulus is always superior to an unpredictable one. And sometimes that's genuinely true, but the body isn't a machine that improves by receiving the same signal on repeat. It's a system that adapts to challenge, specific challenge, varied challenge. The kind that doesn't let you settle into a pattern and coast. By removing that variation, we didn't just make exercise more comfortable, we made it less complete. And right now in 2026, there are millions of Americans running, lifting and rowing, putting in serious, consistent hours, wondering why their real-world physical capability doesn't match what their metrics say it should be. The machine told them they were getting stronger. It just didn't tell them what kind of strong. And there's a difference. A measurable, documented 31% difference. Here's where things actually stand in 2026. In the sports labs and performance coaching programs that have been paying close attention to this research. Water rowers, machines that use actual water in a flywheel chamber to create natural variable resistance, are outselling hydraulic models in performance training environments for the first time. Coaches in Scandinavian national rowing programs have reintroduced mandatory open water sessions, even for indoor track athletes. And a group at the University of Copenhagen is currently running a 2-year longitudinal trial on variable resistance training protocols, specifically modeled on pre-industrial rowing techniques. They're not calling it Viking training in the paper, but that's what it is. Meanwhile, back here in the US, the American fitness market is growing fast. The Health and Fitness Association confirmed 19 straight quarters of record visitation growth through 2025. And the quality of that training is becoming the next frontier. It's not enough anymore to just show up. The question coaches and serious athletes are asking now is, are you training with tools that are actually honest about what your body needs? Or are you training with tools that are comfortable, measurable, and quietly incomplete? The question I keep sitting with, and I don't have a clean answer for this, is how many other places we made the same trade. A messy, effective tool for a clean, comfortable one, and called it an upgrade. Because this wasn't the only time we did that. And if we got this one wrong, it's worth slowing down and asking honestly, where else did we stop listening to what the body was actually telling us?